Thank you. I'm going to speak in English. Not because it's easier for me, but for those who don't speak Spanish. I think one of the conclusions of the story of the chapter of my book, and before I go into that, I want to thank Miami Book International and Original Books for organizing this event. I want to thank Rose Montoya for introducing, and all of you for being here at this early hour. I'm very happy to be here with my colleagues. The story I tell in my chapter, I think its most important conclusion is that, contrary to Marxist theory, the history of Cuba could have been different. The revolution was not inevitable. When Batista coup d'etat in 1952, which was bloodless but it was violent, and which made that the constitutional rhythm of the country was interrupted, the opposition to Batista took two main avenues: the violent through the revolution led by Castro, and the political. And the man who headed to the end that political opposition was Carlos Marquez Terli. As Rose Montoya said, he was my stepfather, as I like to call him my second father. And which means that the events in that chapter I witnessed at a very young age, as a young teenager, and marked me forever. But at the same time, it forced me to document everything I wrote so that nobody would think I really was biased, and also because I was very curious to know if my memory was correct. Carlos Marquez Terli was a politician, a man of letters, a lawyer, a university professor, who had been a congressman for 12 years, presided the House of Representatives, presided the Constitutional Assembly of 1940. It's a very beautiful moment in Cuban history. This was the only time when Cubans, without no foreign intervention, gave themselves a very advanced constitution, maybe even too advanced. And Carlos Marquez Terli had the rare privilege of being considered in Cuba an honest man. He had a sterling reputation, and no pun intended about sterling, because of his integrity and his honesty. At a time when there were many honest politicians, but also there was corruption. There was an election in November 3rd, 1958, in which he was a candidate to the presidency. He offered that he would be 2 years as president, that he would had an amnesty for the rebels, and a general election in 2 years, so that he would be, and that he would not aspire to be president again. What happened was that he was really persecuted by the Batista people and by the Castro people. He was here in the crossfire. But the Batista people around Batista were not interested in leaving power. And the elections were rigged. And now, even though we were sure there were, it's been, and I'm very sad that this happened after my father passed away, it's now been documented how the elections were rigged. And there's a book published here by an assistant of Batista, and there's a book published in Havana, which is exactly the same information that came out the same year in 2008. The Castro regime, before it came into power, did not want the elections to take place, and they really threatened the people not to go to vote, and they threatened the candidates. Actually, they made a law in La Sierra Maestra that had called for the death penalty for all the candidates. And some of the candidates who were party were killed. One of them, I was very, very impressed when it happened, because he had been in my home 2 days before, and he had a little baby about 14, 15 months old, and he had just gone to his house in Camagüey, put the girl down the crib, and they came to his house and they shot him to death, and the bullets came through the bars of the crib of the girl, and had she not been lying down, they would have killed the baby too. And there were 3 assassination attempts against my father. He was detained during Batista. He was detained on January 4th. Well, the revolution won. But what happened after the revolution was, it was not enough that, you know, that they had tried to kill him, that he lost elections, that elections were rigged, but they really attempted to tarnish his reputation by creating these false documents saying that Batista had given him money to be role play as the opposition candidate. And now it's totally a contradiction when there are books published in Cuba explaining how Batista actually stole the election, exchanged the ballot boxes. So why would you give money to the opposition candidate if you, and then really rig the elections? But still, in blogs, in the internet, in the National Archives, which I have seen, the same information appears that this man was paid off by Batista, which I know it's absolutely untrue. Even though it's personal for me, it has a much higher context. It's a way of discrediting all the politicians from the Cuban Republic and discrediting their republic. And I think one of the important points of the story too is that this intimidation started even before the revolution came to power. And I think that's one of the reasons this book is so important, because we have heard about character assassination, but to my knowledge, this is the first book that has a series of individual stories that are representatives of a group of people and that go from before the revolution getting to power to the present time. So here is a history that adds up individual histories that have collective meaning through a span of more than 50 years. So you can see how that system works. I also believe that last but not least, there is, and that's why I recommend this book, and I'm so happy to be part of it, there's a need to set the record straight for the future of Cuba. The history has to be retold. The history has to be, set straight. In Elio Ciabobo's celebrated Charter I, the Chinese dissident and recipient of the Nobel Prize winner proposes under number 19, truth in reconciliation, and I cite, we should restore the reputation of all people, including their family members, who suffered political stigma in the political campaigns of the past, who have been labeled as criminals because of their thought, speech, or faith. I think that this formula of restoring the reputation of people is very, very important for the future of Cuba and for the reconciliation of Cubans, and I hope this book will be a contribution to such future. Thank you.